Good. Well, good evening, everybody. This session is really it's not to teach people stuff. It's really how you can teach people stuff. I'm hoping. I think a lot of you are leaders in ARIES and other public service organizations. And a lot of times you have new operators coming in, especially newer hams who don't have a lot of on the air experience, and they want to know, what how do I be helpful? And to me, I mean, there are a lot of things they need to learn, but one of the key ones is how to uh, how to handle basic voice messaging operations when you're in a either a deployment situation or an exercise, and there are skills that they need to build. So this really session is built on what I term ACS 101. It's kind of our introductory mandatory course for all our Los Angeles ACS members, and it focuses on uh, basic messaging and voice messaging procedures. And what I'm going to do is give you some ideas on how you can construct a class that will bring people through this. I've done this dozens of times, and I even have people who've been there a lot of for years, and they say I always learn something new. So hopefully you'll find it useful. Um, so this is kind of a sample curriculum, and it covers basically, if you cover all the suggested topics, including the exercises, it'll take 5 to 6 hours. Usually we have a break somewhere in the middle for a quick lunch, and sometimes we'll use that to have somebody give a WinLink demo or something. Um, Now, this does not cover any information about your served agency or their procedures. It doesn't really cover uh, in depth the FEMA formats or the incident command system. Those should be introduced separately. And of course, if you're volunteering for an entity that gets federal preparation funds, your folks all need to take the basic intro courses, IS 100, 200, 700, 800, the current version of those. So that's not part of this. You could build it in, or you could make it a separate session, or you could break this into multiple sessions if you want. You could break them into small pieces and make them, 1 hour exercises during a club meeting, for example. So it's flexible, but this is just how I approach it. And the idea that I'm trying to get across is as you teach each skill, then give them a chance to practice it right away. And we build on that. And then by the end, we have a comprehensive exercise where they have to pull all that stuff together. So here's kind of what we try to cover: improving participants' copying skills. That is the ability to hear something on the air and record it accurately. Um, One of the things that bugs me when we have public service nets, there are some people who really get it and they do well at it, but there are some that they hear a call, somebody calls in, and they have to run down a list to try and find them. And when the net's delayed and delayed because they keep finding a list, I said, don't use a list. You know, get what you hear and write it down. The more you do that, the better you're going to be at it. I happen to do a lot of contesting, specifically DX contesting overseas, and you don't have the luxury of having the person repeat things 5 times. Usually, you got to hear it and get it down, whether it's on computer or on paper. So that's a key skill. Um, Basic sending and receiving of voice messages, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong there. And by studying some of these formats and procedures, they can eliminate a lot of that and make the process a lot more efficient. We're going to have a very brief introduction to FEMA formats um, that they're likely to run into. We're going to talk about the proper use of tactical call signs. This is something that confuses a lot of hams and non-hams alike. Um, and then there's a tactical call sign classroom exercise where you really get to see how they're doing with all the concepts you've talked about so far. And then we talk a little about condensing lengthy messages in order to conserve channel resources, and a little of operating on a controlled net. Then, as I said, we usually have a lunch break, and then we have a kind of a comprehensive exercise where we break people up into groups, and I'll describe that in a little more basically. But That's basically the program. And as I say, when I do this, it runs, typically we run like 9 to 3, that sort of thing. So, allow around 6 hours plus or minus a little bit. And as I said, you can break it into pieces if you want to do that. So these are the basic skills we're trying to get people to learn and to practice. And again, it's not just classroom; they've got to use it. Otherwise, it will not flourish. First thing we do, normally when you have a class, you have everybody go around and introduce themselves. Well, I use that as a copy exercise. I have everybody has to bring pencil and paper because they're going to do a lot of writing in this class. So you have each person stand up and you say, okay, you give your FCC call sign using the proper phonetics. You give your first name. If it's uncommon spelling, spell it phonetically, and then have everybody keep a log, and that is write down the names and calls that they hear. This is sort of what you would do in a net, except people wouldn't normally necessarily read the names. But we want everybody to listen and then write it down. And the first thing we usually put a slide up with the phonetic alphabet for those who are not familiar with it yet. So it's up there on the screen and they can refer to it if they need to. And then we start with the instructor or instructors modeling the introduction. November 6th, Victor, India, Marty. And then we go and we start pointing and you have people go one by one, stand up, give that information. Everybody's supposed to be writing this down. And when you're all done, now you have a chance to see how everybody did. And we usually turn it back to them and say, well, what sort of problems did you have? Okay, here's the chart that we stick up. And usually the most common complaint is, well, they were going faster than I could write. And that's common for people who are used to conversational voice and not for passing a message that may have to be written down. And so we advise them, when you're giving a message that somebody else has to write down, don't speak any faster than you yourself could write it. And the speed will vary with the message content. Even if people are trying to slow down, they'll use constant spacing and they'll use the same length of time for a one syllable word as they will for a 4-syllable word. And yet the 4-syllable word takes longer to write down. So, think about how long it takes to write that, give them the time. And, accuracy trumps speed. We keep trying to remind them of that. As they've gone through that and they all start to get the idea, give them some additional suggestions on how they can improve their copying skills. And one of the best ones, of course, is every time you're on a net, even if you're on not net control, write it down as though you were, so that you get used to hearing, writing, getting it down accurately. If they have access to an HF radio, have them find a DX pileup or a contest pileup, start writing down call signs. Monitoring air traffic control frequencies, monitoring fire or police tactical frequencies, using your ICAO phonetics to spell street signs, license plates, whatever, while you're driving. And if you have one around, I suggest people check into or at least monitor a national traffic system net. They have a fairly deliberate procedure for moving message traffic. And in our case here in LA, there are voice nets a couple of nights a week on a system, a multi-repeater system, and anybody can listen, and we encourage them to do that. So you want them to try using these skills all the time. And again, listen, get it down, and they will get better very fast if they just keep doing that consistently.
So glad for you, honey.
Okay, somebody's not muted.
Forgot my phone.
Okay. Now we talk about the actual procedures of getting a voice message from one place to another. One thing you have to remind people is that you don't just call and start reading the message without asking anything. I've had that situation. I was net control for a statewide medical exercise in the Los Angeles area, and I was at the Medical Alert Center, and I had a station we had like 20 people at 25 hospitals or so around the county. And one of them called in, and as soon as I acknowledged them, they started off with this long message. I was in the middle of talking to the client, the served agency, and I was not ready for a message, let alone one that was read at copy speed or at conversational speed and was 5 minutes long and took about 2 pages to write down. So I had to tell them, you know, I'm sorry, but I wasn't ready to copy. The message is too long and you went too fast. So please reconfigure it and get back to me when you're ready to give me a reasonably compact message at copy speed. Um, so we have to get them used to the idea that this is not a telephone conversation. Um, First thing they have to do is establish contact with their target, whether it's net control or somebody else, and be acknowledged. Uh, Advise them that you have a message to send. And if there's a specific format to that message, let them know. Uh, if I'm getting an infrastructure status report, I'm going to be grabbing, I'm expecting one set of information. If I'm getting uh, a radiogram, I'm expecting another set of information. So let them know what the format is because it gives them a clue as to what's coming next. And then confirm that they are ready to copy. I have a message, advise when you're ready to copy. And once the person says ready, then you go ahead and start your message. And this seems pretty basic to a lot of us, but people just think I've got a microphone, I can start talking. And they have to get used to that exchange. This is not full duplex. So it's not where the person can interrupt you and say, wait a minute while I get a pencil. We talked about specific procedures. Could be you have maybe some specific forms for your agency, whether it's a Red Cross or your county emergency management agency. Um, you'll see on WinLink an infrastructure status report that's used also on voice for people that are out in the field, letting you know what's working and what isn't after a disaster. You got the ICS 213, pretty generic, radiograms, and whatever you have. In our ACS, we have a dispatch form that if for some reason the fire department's repeater system goes down, they can't get the they can't get the dispatch information over the hill into the valley. We can actually take that information, send it to them, put it on a form that they can actually use in lieu of a computer system or whatever to manage the incident. Next is you introduce the use of pro words. I spell, figures, letter group, mixed group. I think most of you know how that works, but we give them examples and remind them that if you have an unusual word or one that could be easily confused with another, a homonym, you would say the word and then I spell, and you spell it out phonetically. If you have a group of letters like Aries, letter group Alpha Romeo Echo Sierra. If you have numbers, you say figures, and then of course you read the figures one numeral at a time. If there's a decimal point, you say decimal, and so on. And then when you're done, end of message. They know that that's it. So here are some examples of some of the ones I put up for them to try. And after the first couple, they usually get it pretty well. Again, now these slides, of course, will be available through the PowerPoint that's posted for RATPAC. So, if you want to use this, or you could make your own up that's, are local to your particular area. That's the sort of, exercise that will help them get used to precision in their speaking. Um, Also remind participants that after they're done sending end of message and they wait for the next operator, it may be a minute or two because the person may still be writing. They may be checking a word count, something like that. So they have to be patient and then wait for the operator to come back and either roger the message, or if they missed part of it or part of it was unclear, they would ask for fills. Those of you who've done National Traffic System, you know how all this works. So that we talk about how to ask for fills and then how to give them. We encourage people, say again, word before whatever, or say again, all after whatever. We don't say repeat because in tough conditions, repeat sounds like received. And they tell me in the military, which I never had the pleasure of, that repeat means send another batch of ammo and rounds on that target. Um, so these are simple ways to ask for what you want. Now, if you're the sending person, of course, and somebody says, say again, word after so and so. I've had people just start the whole message over again, and no, that's not what they want. Listen to what they're asking for and give them that. I say again, and you give the word and the missing and the word after so that they get it. Now, again, I will usually have some prepared messages that short messages, one sentence types that I will read at copy speed one at a time, and each time I'll have people ask for fills because I keep my handheld with the volume up and I open the squelch so that it blocks part of what I'm saying, and they know they're going to somebody's going to have to ask for a fill, and so I have select people to answer, call back and ask me, you know, what, what word they need or what section they need using the procedures we just talked about. And then I will demo giving it back to them the way they asked. So, sometimes I'll block the first few words, sometimes the last few words, or a couple things in the middle. But make some up and they'll get used to the idea of asking correctly instead of just read the whole thing again. And that's that skill. So again, each time we introduce this skill, we give them some things to practice on and actually try it so they get used to what it sounds like and they get used to doing it themselves. And then, of course, you have to wait until the receiving operator, once they have whatever fills they need, to acknowledge the message that they've got it, and then either next message or you clear the frequency. This is a kind of a fun section because the exercise can get pretty complicated if you want it to be, but it causes people to really think about what they're doing. And there are lots of corrections needed usually when they start getting into this. I'll describe the exercise in a bit. But, as I said earlier, participants may not be familiar with tactical call signs or may confuse it with FCC call signs. And most of them will not have used it. So allow time for this one. This takes a fair amount of the class time, but it's worth it to me. We remind them that these are radio identifiers that are assigned not to a person, but to a location or a function or a team in connection with an incident or operation or drill. And we give them some examples of descriptive tactical call signs. We remind them that they don't have to be descriptive if you don't want to. But I usually tell a story about one of our exercises with the National Guard, California National Guard, and UCLA Medical Center. And this was a biohazard slash nuclear material terrorist type of situation. Now, we were using 2 meters to go between 3 different locations around campus, which are fairly widely separated. And we didn't want people listening, even though we say this is a drill, we didn't want people freaking out about decontamination chambers and all that sort of stuff. So instead, we basically decided on some fairly generic tactical call signs. So the decontamination trailer was just trailer. The command post was admin, and the triage area they had outside the building was reception. So, that way it didn't sound too threatening as we were going through this exercise. We then explained to them, why tactical call signs are useful. I mean, we all have our own personal call signs. Gee, what do we need these for? Well, if you have somebody, you have a team that's manning a particular location, or you have a shift change, I, as the net control, I want to reach, General Hospital, and do I have to remember that it's KB6XYZ? Oh, and now it's KN6AAG. No, uh, they don't. Tactical calls don't change when the operators move in and out of an assignment. So all the other users have some consistency. If they want to reach General Hospital, all they have to do is call General Hospital or whatever the other tactical was assigned for that one. And it also makes it easier for several different users or operating units to use one communication channel, such as an area-wide repeater. Because once they call the tactical call of who they want, the rest of the people say, "Oh, it's not for me. I can go back to whatever else I was doing," and they're always usually somewhat busy. Important thing to stress for your participants is that for tactical call signs to be used properly, everybody has to know what they are in advance and agree to them and stick with them and don't change them. Uh, you probably, in your own experience, have some examples of how that worked out really well and examples how it was done very poorly. Another medical exercise, I was up on the roof of an adjacent building to be able to reach the medical alert center, and the hospital personnel were all in their building, and they gave me a one of their commercial UHF handhelds to communicate with them so that I could then pass things on to the medical alert center. And as I was listening, I mean, they'd never agreed on what tactical calls were, and they would their command post was called by 6 or 7 different names, and you had people, Mary, can you hear me? And this is a medical center with thousands of people, so clearly they need some training, and we've offered that training to them, but remind them that proper use of tactical call signs can cut down on a lot of confusion, and it will tie up your frequency for as long if you use it properly. Now, I had a section emergency coordinator from one of our sections in the Southwestern Division say, "Hey, we've got a member here who insists that tactical call signs aren't legal for hams." I said, can you can you convince him? Well, I said, well, of course we can, because a tactical call it's shorthand. It's like your name, okay? And because it's not a substitute for your FCC call sign, you give your FCC call as required by Part 97, which is either every 10 minutes if it's a long exchange, which it shouldn't be, or you give it at the end of the transmission or a short series of transmissions. Um, yeah, usually in an EmComm or drill situation, nobody's talking for more than 10 minutes. Um, so if they understand that if you're not using an amateur, let's say the fire department or the hospital or whatever handed you their radios, then you not only don't need to use your amateur call, you're not allowed to use your amateur call because it's a different service, and their system will take care of the ID. So their tactical call signs alone will be adequate. But the general procedure is the whole exchange is using tactical calls, and at the very end, when you're done, you give your FCC call. And that does 2 things. It meets your ID requirements for Part 97, and it signals to everybody else on the channel that you're done. Okay. So when they initiate a call, again, they should get used to using, command. This is Well Shelter. Who the tactical of the person you're calling, or the function you're calling, and the function tactical call, and use that consistently throughout the exchange until the end. This is kind of new to people, but once they get used to it, they realize, how useful it is. So as I said, the giving your FCC call at the end does a couple of things that are helpful. Now here's the exercise that I developed, and again, it takes a while, but it's really useful. We usually break participants into teams of 3 or 4, depending on how many people you have. You could have it up to 6 each, but I like to make sure everybody has some time on the radio, so 3 or 4 is ideal. And each team will be separate. They'll choose a command post operator. If they have an extra person, a scribe, but that's optional. a damage assessment team, and a shelter team. And each team will just typically be one person. And then each team will select their own tactical call signs for each of those positions. And you remind them, don't just use shelter and uh, damage assessment or so on, because everybody has the same general assignment type, and you're going to confuse one with the other. So you have to make it specific to their location or their function. And again, they can use descriptive, they can use non-descriptive, but they have to pick their own tactical calls and make sure everybody writes them down and knows who they are, because that's going to be who they're calling or who they're listening for. So then you're going to hand out some instructions, and I'll give you an example of these in a minute. But you're going to have prepared 4, 5, 6 sets of team instructions, each with different information requests and different responses. They'll all be kind of the same. I mean, you know, you may go to different places but ask for the same thing. Um, so what I do is I have instructions for each team uh, printed and laminated, and then I put them in envelopes, and I'll give the first team envelope number 1, then number 2. Once the teams are organized, I hand out these instructions. The team instructions are out there in the open, and each of the field teams, the shelter and the damage assessment team, are going to get theirs in an envelope that they don't open until they're out literally in the field. So here's an example of the ones I made up. Okay, we tell them, okay, you're going to use audio for this. You don't need radios, and you're going to identify your functions, your team people, agree on who's going to do what job, and then agree on the tactical call signs. They'll need 3 tactical call signs: one for the command post, one for the shelter team, one for the damage assessment team. Now, this is what will differ from each of the sets. Well, you'll direct your damage team to proceed to a given location, and each team will have a different location they have to report on and report what they find there. And then you direct your shelter team to proceed to the shelter, and each team will have a different shelter name. And we want them to come back with the name of their shelter contact and what power sources are available for communications. And then if there's a scribe, they should record all responses. If it's the command post operator, it's just a team of 3, the command post operator will record all the responses himself or herself. And then once all the teams have reported back with the requested information, then the command post operator calls his folks and instructs them to return back. Now, when we do this, we have the teams actually go out away from the location that they met at the table, and go to a different part of the room. And when they open up their instructions, here's an example of the first team. You know, confirm the name of your destination, report back when you reach the assignment location, allow a little bit of time, and then you're going to report your location. And, in this case, I said smell of natural gas and 1 small structure fire. Each set of, I've printed the answers for them, so it makes it easy for them. This is just on a strip of paper that's been laminated. And each one has a different finding, a different result. So they're not all sending the same thing. We send them to the shelter team, same instruction. Report when you get to your location, give it a little time, and then report what you find. And in this case, they were sent to Westside Park Shelter, who's the name of the contact and what power is available. And I have different names and different scenarios, power scenarios, for each of the teams. So again, they're given the same instructions, but they're all reporting something different. And they all have to compete for airtime, and we don't want them interrupting somebody else by just being louder. So they have to wait, and when somebody clears the frequency, somebody else jumps in. And some of them will be fairly aggressive about jumping in and getting their stuff done quickly. Others will be sitting there waiting, and they'll get done last. And everybody, of course, is going to hear what everybody else is sending. They're going to hear the format, hear whether they did all the things they're supposed to do and whether it was understandable and readable. So it's really good feedback because they get feedback from one another after this thing is over. So again, once everybody's you check and make sure everybody's gotten the assignment, everybody has their tactical calls identified, they're ready to go out. So each field team goes to another part of the room, again away from the command post operator, and they open their envelopes.
What's up?
Somebody call. Was there a question? Okay, no, somebody's not muted. So as I say, they all have to kind of wait for an opening to initiate their message. And it kind of simulates having multiple users on, say, one repeater, having to share airtime and avoid interfering with other people. And importantly, when you get back, you get them all back together, they've all recalled their teams, they're back in one place. Then you start having the participants themselves comment on their own performance and the performance of their peers. Did the messages get through? I usually allow, say, 20 to 25 minutes to get this done, depending on the number of teams. Were they using the appropriate tactical call signs? Did everybody ID with their FCC call at the end so they knew the frequency was clear and somebody else could start? What sorts of obstacles did they encounter? Did they start talking before the person was ready to copy? That happens a fair amount. Were there did they fail? Did the person receiving it fail to acknowledge the message? Were they speaking too fast? Were they unclear? If they needed fills, did they do it properly, or was there difficulty getting them? This takes all the stuff we've learned up to now, we've taught them up to now, and have them use it all in one exercise. It's really eye-opening, and I've had people say we need more of these. Next, we talk about condensing lengthy messages. Now, not all messages need to be condensed, but if you've got somebody who comes in with something that's fairly long, it could tie out a lot of airtime, and it could tie up both operators on both ends that could be doing something else. And the longer the message is, the less likelihood that it's going to get through without some errors. So we have an exercise or two where we have them condense some messages, and then we remind them, make sure you listen, see what the messenger, what the sender wants. You get it down in a condensed way and get their approval of the message, and then you send it. We talk about condensing techniques, omitting pronouns and articles, always omitting speculation and opinions, regardless of how long the message is. Focus on the who, what, where, when, why, all that. And if you have the people to do it, that would be part of an intake function, not the radio operator function. This is the person who's at the front desk receiving messages or handing them to somebody to run to deliver. So I'll give them an example. The original message here is like almost 50 words, and it includes, some speculation and so on. So I say, okay, what's the key stuff? The earthquake has caused numerous cracks to appear in the 118 freeway overpass at Reseda Boulevard. May not be safe to drive on or under while we're having aftershocks. We need LADOT to provide traffic control and a structural engineer to examine the overpass. Well, that's a pretty long message. So we give them a chance to try condensing that, and they usually do a pretty good job. Here's what I did. I show in yellow the stuff that we got rid of, and we say cracks in 118 overpass at Reseda, request traffic control and structural engineer. You've pretty much gotten everything you need there without, and it's down to what, 14 words or something like that. So then we have them each try to condense this message, and I give them this one. You can make your own up that's appropriate to your location, but make it wordy, and then have them see what they can do to get the core idea through without a lot of extra words. This one has 47 words, and we let people read their answers, and people evaluate it. Gee, you left out this thing, or this wasn't really important, you didn't have to say it. So again, they feed back to one another. It doesn't all have to be from the instructor, and they start to recognize this. And the more they each are listening to the other ones, they start to get the idea of what works and what doesn't. So then after that, we do an individual exercise. I have each participant take a piece of paper. We always bring lots of pencil and paper. You're going to be doing copying here. We have them, hit save the bottom third of the page, leave it blank, put their name and call on the upper corner of the page, and then they print. We want them to come up with one message with a word count of between 30 and 50, and try to include at least one set of either figures or letters or mixed group. And then you're going to exchange those with other people in the room. Okay. And then each person is going to take the message they received from it that was written by another of the participants, and they're going to try to condense it. Okay. Now, when they're done, we don't discuss this or share it because they keep it, and that's what's going to be used in the final exercise. This is we then talk about operating on a controlled net. Now, some of them have been on nets quite a while, others haven't. Some have been on club nets where it's very chatty and they just kind of pass the mic around. Those are really uncontrolled or minimally controlled nets. So we remind them net control is kind of the traffic cop, and you only speak when directed or requested by net control. You check in and check out with net control. Not all nets do this. Our public service nets do, primarily because we want you to practice as though it was for real. And in a real situation, if we deployed you somewhere, you don't just go home and not tell anybody, because we think you're still out there, and if danger's there, you may have to send somebody to go and get them. So always check out with net control. Let them know when you're arriving at a place, when you're leaving somewhere. We want to encourage being there. Also, if they have to check out, it means they have to sit there and listen to the actual traffic that's being passed by whoever's running the net, or the people that have traffic. So this is a good fit for, of course, tactical nets, traffic nets, resource nets, which are the ones where you try to find out who's available, and then you deploy them and hand them on to whoever's running the tactical nets. Most of your new folks won't be net controls right away, but we encourage them to try to do that. We have, we say, look, nobody's going to die if you make a mistake on this net while we're practicing. So get used to it. And we remind them that net control has several obligations. And I have a whole separate training on being net control. But as a basic rule, they have to handle the priority activities before the routine ones. Sometimes they'll have a limited amount of time. This is certainly true in traffic nets where they're tying up a multi-site repeater system. They need to get the most done in the least amount of time. Importantly, they have to keep track of participants and their requests. So if somebody has a message that, when they're done checking in, they have to go back and make sure that person gets a chance to get their message sent. Sometimes they will be disseminating incident status, or they will be directing them to some other source of information where they can find out about incident status. And then we have asked the participants, how can you help make this happen? How can you make net control's job easier? And they come up with, the things that they should be doing, only calling in when requested, keeping their comments brief, and so on. So what we want to make sure net control does, if they ever get a chance to do that, and we do encourage them to do that, first is minimize dead air time in a timed net, like a weekly agency net or something. It's not just a round table as people are driving to work, and you don't want people sitting there wondering what's going on. And the situation I mentioned at the beginning, where somebody who's net control here's a call checking in, and they're sitting there for 30 or 45 seconds trying to find them on a list as opposed to just writing it down. That's the sort of thing that makes everybody wonder what the heck's going on. Acknowledge requests promptly and specifically. I can't tell you how many times I've heard on public service nets too. Uh, Taking check-ins, and 2 or 3 people call in, and net control says, okay, I got you. Well, which one? Everybody thinks they checked in. Usually only one really did, because net control only heard one of them. So all acknowledgments should be specific by call or name or however you want to do it. Net control should tell the participants what they want and what they expect. Uh, when my wife was, she's been licensed about 12 years. She's been an NTS operator and NTS traffic net control quite a few times. Uh, when she gets people calling in, she wants, call one at a time and wait till I acknowledge that person before the next one. She doesn't like pileups. I like pileups. I'll take everybody from battalion 14 and I'll just write them down as I hear them and then acknowledge each one individually. So, net control gets to decide how things run. Make sure you have a clear voice, good audio, and a strong signal. We encourage people to, whether they're running, particularly when they're running the net, but even if they're just checking in, get a signal check ahead of time. Find out if their signal is strong, weak, the audio is good, if they got a hum or a buzz, if they're not intelligible because of something or other, and they need to do that ahead of the net. The net control has to maintain a log and, of course, keep it current. That log will be not only who checked in, who has traffic, who has specific requests. Net control, net control sets the tone. Try to speak with precision. Leave out a lot of, oh, I don't know where I put my pencil. Hang on a minute. We tell everybody, hey, if you need a second, all stations please stand by, and then you just wait, and then you come back. So try not to think while you're holding the mic button down. And of course, at least one of your participants will know the answer to this joke. Guy goes to, in New York, he goes to a taxi. Excuse me, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? And the answer is
practice, practice, practice.
Practice. There you go. Okay, so now we typically do a lunch break, and that's a good time for somebody to talk about WinLink or someone maybe a served agency function or something. Then after that, we go to our final exercise. We divide the class into 2 groups, and they're each going to take 2 turns. The first time, the one group will go into another room, and we'll be using radios this time set on low power. And one at a time, each will take that message that they condensed from somebody else that they got earlier, and they will call in and deliver that message using all the protocols that we talked about earlier. Meanwhile, one of the people in the group that stays in the room is the receiver, and they will be the receiving operator, and they will acknowledge, and they will tell them when they're ready to copy. They'll ask for fills if they need to, and they will roger the message, and then transmitting group changes to another person, receiving group changes to another person. We go through all that, and then we have them change places, and the second group is now the senders, and the first group is now the receivers. Again, everybody's standing around. You can hear what people are doing, how they're doing it, and it's a good way to make sure they kind of get the processes that you've been trying to get across and that they practiced during the day. I actually have a kind of a score sheet, and I have another experienced operator or co-instructor with one of the groups, and we kind of say, did they do this, did they do that, did they do that, are they having trouble somewhere? And we kind of keep a record of that so we can focus later after the class on people who are seeming to have trouble in one area or another and not following the procedure, don't understand it. So for simplicity, we give everybody all the senders have a common tactical call, and all the receivers have a common tactical call, so they don't have to make it up as they go along. Again, we remind them to follow all those procedures that we've covered in the course, contact protocols, reading speed, use of pro words, asking for fills, use of tactical call signs, and their FCC ID at the end. When we're all done, we reconvene and have everybody kind of share their experiences from that exercise and for the day, answer any questions. When I do a course, I always have an evaluation form afterward. I want to find out how much it helped them improve in certain areas, whether they have observations that could improve the course, suggestions of additional material, and so on. And those are also very helpful. So that is the end of that. So I hope this will give you some ideas on training that you can do for your newer operators. I'll be glad to take questions or comments and suggestions. Ev's got
Okay,
his hand up.
Barry, what we got in chat?
We're good in chat right now.
Okay, Everett, you got your hand up?
Ev, go ahead. Mike Zulu, go ahead.
Oh, that me? Okay, thank you.
That's
I
you.
Everett. I wasn't sure we were talking to somebody else. First of all, will you please say again everything after Nancy 6, Victor India, and that copy speed? So, thank you. Great presentation. I had to step away for a moment, but did you talk about the fact that as radio operators, we are message handlers and not decision makers? And to give you an example of that, there was another platform group that I was involved in called Formidable Footprint. And they were talking about a flood. And somebody had reported that there were 3 propane tanks floating in the river. And all the guys in the room were saying, well, yeah, I'd do this. I'd send somebody out with a chain. I'd send somebody out with a rope. And I says, no, we just pass the message to the appropriate authority. We don't make the decision of how they're going to recover it.
Yep,
And that changed.
we're the Radar O'Reilly.
But that.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to put out was you talked about long, lengthy messages like I'm doing right now. One job I had critically impressed upon me. Airtime is expensive. For ham radio, there's no cost to this. Yeah, I get that. But just think about it. Airtime is expensive. Keep it short. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Okay, very good, Ev. Thank you. We've got a couple of other hands up here. Gene?
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Oh, sorry. Don, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Marty. First, just a quick comment. The content that you've been sharing is absolutely fantastic and certainly meets a need that I have. I work in healthcare in emergency management in the Philly metro area, and we are in the process of actually formalizing our communications, and amateur radio is part of that. Which kind of segues into my next 2 questions. Do we have permission to use your content? Are we able to use that?
Yes, absolutely. That's the purpose of it. I want you to use the content and adapt it to your own situation as needed. And as I mentioned earlier, both this session, the recording of this session, and the slides will all be on the RATPAC site for you to download or use as you want.
Excellent, thank you. And that kind of the next question, and this will be my final question, is you mentioned that you have a net control class. Do you have one of those recorded also and available?
I don't think I've ever recorded that one. It's usually done in person. I don't do that on Zoom because all the things I have them do, it's pretty hard to do on a Zoom call. So those are typically done in person.
I'll see if I can get my boss to send me west. Thanks, Marty. I appreciate that.
Okay, and if need be, I can. If you send me an email, I can send you the slides so at least you can see how we do it, and then you can do those exercises yourself. I do things like I have a little pilot practice. What if too many people are calling at once? I pull a bunch of calls from a DX contest, and I put them into 3 columns, and I hand 1 column to each person, and then the 4th person is the guinea pig, the net control in the hot seat. And I have all 3 people pick a call and call at once and see how many they can pick out, that sort of thing. That's not what you can't really do that online.
Hey, Marty, can I make a comment real quick to his question?
Yeah.
Hey, Don, DuPage, Illinois, Aries does a net control class over Zoom. And I think their next one is going to be in September, and it is a phenomenal class. It's about an hour and a half long, and it's incredible.
Wow, great. Scott, maybe if you don't mind, when you find out the details, if you would put a link out to our group, a lot of people would appreciate that if there's room on the Zoom call.
Absolutely. Let me go look right now, and I'll chime back.
No
in.
rush if it's September, but at least I know people would appreciate that. I'm sure they'll find it valuable. I've tried to check in myself. Thank you.
Yeah, they sent me the PowerPoints to the class, and they said I can freely use them.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
You bet, Don.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment here. RATPAC's presentations, all of them, we got over 300 and something, I don't know, 350, whatever they are. They're all free. Use them. They're no permission required, or use them for your clubs, use them for your organizations. However you want to do it, you do not need prior permission. Okay, Gene, you got your hand up.
Gene.
Yes, good evening, everybody. This is Gene from Texas. I found in the past when I've tried to assist students for academic success is try to teach them the difference between hearing and listening. And they're actually two different things, because you can be in a room with 20 people and you're going to hear 20 people, but you might only be listening to two. Like,
Gene, your audio is breaking up. Maybe you can turn your camera off to save bandwidth.
is that any better?
Right. Try again.
Okay, any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, try to teach the students the difference between hearing and listening. You're in a room with 20 people, you're going to be hearing 20 people, but you're going to want to listen to like key words or phrases they say, and that includes the instructor. Everybody's going to hear the instructor, but you have to listen to the instructor for the key words that he or she is saying.
Yeah, good point. And that in fact is why we intersperse exercises with almost everything we talk about, to make sure that everybody's kind of got it before we move on, so we don't lose anybody. Carolyn has her hand
Right,
up. Hi,
that's all I
Carolyn.
got.
Okay, Carolyn?
Yeah, I
Welcome
just
aboard.
wanted to, I just wanted to make a comment. I've taken Marty's class that he delivered tonight about 3 times by now with ACS, and it is an excellent class. And you always come away each time learning something new and different. So thank you for that, Marty.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. By the way, Carolyn, how long have you been licensed, Carolyn?
Since 2014.
Okay, so about 10 years, and it wasn't too long after that she joined ACS. And in that time, she went through and got her general, got her extra. She set up, figured out how to use WinLink, and then she set up her own gateway. So there's somebody who just takes learning to another level, and we love it.
Thank you.
And we love having her on this program too. She joins us quite often. Thank you, Carolyn.
I'm a lifelong learner. As long as I'm
That's what
alive,
ham
I'm
radio is
learning
about.
learning something new every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what keeps it fun. Okay. Do we have other questions? Dan's waving his hand. Dan, did you have a question? Or
Yeah, I can't find the wave your hand on this version of
that's
Zoom.
okay. That worked.
So just before the end, you mentioned one time to remember to sign off with your FCC call sign. And I started getting concerned about the use of the phrase tactical call sign. Just FYI, I thought I'd mention that. When you're in the business, you take it for granted, and all the training uses tactical call signs other than Part 97. It shouldn't need to be said to any amateur, but once every 10 minutes and at the end of a QSO.
Yeah.
You have to ID.
In the class, we actually emphasize that multiple times, and we
Okay.
have them do it in all the exercises. in the TAC call exercise and in the final exercise. They have to do that as part of kind of, passing.
Otherwise, it's superlative. And I could have skipped 10 or 15 years of being an amateur radio operator if I'd seen that earlier on. It's really good material.
Thank you.
All
Others?
right. Thank you, Dan. Anybody else?
Well,
Triple A.
anybody? Where is Zoom hiding?
I could open my mouth here and say that
No, you can't.
I've checked with the FCC in the past because we have tactical call signs and they prefer the use of tactical address because what you're doing is addressing, and the call sign in Part 97, if you think about it, it's one of the very few licenses that is provided to an individual rather than a station. So when you think about the control operator is not a station. The control operator is an individual. So they preferred that, at least in WinLink, that when we provide tactical addresses, we refer to them as tactical addresses. It's a hard sell because it's habitual to say tactical call sign. So that would be the only thing I have to say. Other than that, I thought this was really good, except I don't like the word radiogram, but that's just personal.
Yeah, well, I mean, I only include it because some people and some nets will still use it. And
Understood.
yeah, we had a comment, by the way. The raise hand is under the reactions section now. Let me go to Dan HHH. He had his hand up earlier.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on this video recording tonight. How is it listed on the RATPAC site? Is it under date, your name, or what?
They're all by date, and they have the title of the talk, and they're all in sequence. So this will be number 370, whatever.
I'd like to comment here real quick, jump in here. Let's treat RATPAC like it's a net. Don't jump in. This is jumping in free for all stuff. You've got lots of meaningful things to say, but you can raise your hand, bring it to our attention. Okay, Barry, how we doing?
We're good in chat.
Okay, looks like Scott's got his hand up.
Scott did post that class list in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. And thanks, Dan. I've kind of been busy the last few months, so I haven't been around that much. This is what I get for raising my hand and volunteering. But hey, I post, like Barry said, I posted the that net control thing in the chat, and I just found the PowerPoints. Do you want me to post them in the chat as well?
Maybe you could just post them to the Groups.io site.
No, he doesn't have access to planning.
No. The regular site that all the members use.
Which one?
The one where you send out the invitations?
No, that's planning, and you have.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't have access to that.
Maybe you can send it to Dan then or something.
Yeah, I'll send it to Dan. I'll dig it out. I've dug it out, and I'll send it out. But thanks, Marty. Great class. And the one thing I'd add to this is great job on the radio operator, but the professionalism piece, how to carry yourself and be professional.
As I said, there are a lot of subjects that are not included that are kind of mandatory for somebody who's starting out. I mean, if you take the, I don't know if it's still in the ARRL introductory EmComm class, but that's one of the very first chapters is how to, act professionally, even though you're an unpaid volunteer.
Absolutely. But again, great job. I always love listening to you guys. I will go ahead and crawl back under my rock.
Okay, I'm getting the dinner call. So
Scott can stick out and volunteer for anything.
Well, the problem is when they ask for volunteers and step forward, everybody steps back, and I'm still standing forward.
Yep.
Okay, RATPAC has about, I the last count, 5 different group IOs. There might be 6 out there, but there's 5 that I know of. Barry usually monitors and takes care of those. So when you say just check into the IO, there's a number of them out there. Okay, this Marty says his wife's calling me for dinner, and I know what the hungry feelings feels like. So let's put another last call out there for questions. Nothing heard.
Looks good.
Barry says there's nothing in chat, so let's 73s and let Marty go.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for the good suggestions and all.
Thank you all for coming.